Honda have been kind enough to lend me their top-of-the-range Goldwing DCT Tour with Airbag. It's a £30,000 motorcycle, and one of the most common questions I've had on Instagram about it is, can you really ride a big, heavy, expensive bike like this every day in London? So the Honda Goldwing isn't the obvious choice for like a nippy city commuter, but I've got it for about 3 weeks now, and most of my riding is in central London, so I've just been using it every single day, pretty much, apart from when I went to Morocco for 4 days for the Tiger 900 launch. There's a link to that video in the description if you haven't seen it already, but other than that, I think I've taken this bike out every single day, and I've got to be honest, I've been absolutely loving it. So I'll tell you about why I think it makes a good daily driver, and then I'll tell you about some probably obvious reasons why it's not. I mean, the first thing is having the hard luggage. It's not as big in capacity as the previous Goldwing, I don't think, but for day-to-day use, it's absolutely awesome. The top box will fit a 15-inch laptop in a decent rucksack, so it's nice just to be able to throw that stuff in there. And then the side bags, side cases, panniers, I've been using for, throwing a coat in, or if I'm going filming somewhere, I can even get my small tripod and slider, that kind of equipment in there, which is just amazing. It's really difficult to carry all that stuff on your back on a regular bike. I have this massive backpack that has all sorts of compartments and straps for camera gear, and you're crippled by the time you even get to where you're filming. This is like a studio on wheels. I have thought about it in the past as well. I use my Street Twin for riding every day in London because it's reasonably small and torquey, so it's good between the lights. But I thought, actually, if I'm doing a lot of filming and it's something like an adventure bike where you can strap stuff to it and it's decent on the motorway, that kind of thing would be perfect, especially with 3 cases on the back. So this has proved to me actually that having luggage for that reason, just because I have so much kit day to day, is really handy. Just thought I'd pull over quickly there and show you that the luggage on this bike is a little bit extra special. So it's keyless, so you just press a button under there and then it opens up. You can even see on the screen, let me show you, it tells you that the stand is down and that the top box is open, and it'll tell you which pannier is open as well. Just means when you get somewhere that you literally open it, get your stuff out, close it and walk off, and the fob does the magic. They've got a nice soft opening mechanism as well, look. Beautiful. So yeah, once your keys are outside of like a 1.5 meter radius of the bike, or roughly that, then they won't open if they're closed. But interestingly, also if they're open, you can't shut them. So I assume that Honda have done that so that if you have left them open, people can't shut stuff in there. Or rather, you can't shut stuff in there if you don't have the keys on you. Oh look, it's actually still warning me that it's open. Let me see if I can do it well before we set off. There we go. The second thing that I've been loving about this bike is the warmth. I mean, it's February now, it's a grey day, it's a little bit wet. It's not the nicest for commuting. In fact, it was January when this bike was delivered to me. And even on those really chilly mornings, I don't fret about getting out on the bike. I think the majority of it is down to this huge screen. It's electronically adjustable up and down, look. But I normally just max it out. But I'd also say that these wing mirrors do a great job, even though they look like they're miles away from your hands. Not like a hand guard that you might get on like an off-road style bike, where you can see how that keeps the wind off your knuckles. This looks like it's too far away, but if you don't have gloves on, which I don't ride without gloves, but if I've just been moving the bike around or whatever, or even with gloves actually, lift your hand up there and you can feel how much wind there is. You put them back on the bars, and it's actually surprising how much they create a little pocket. And then of course, if it's extra chilly, you've always got the heated grips and the heated seat and the pillion heated seat, which has a separate control. So you've got buttons on the console here, 5 settings for heated grips and 5 settings for the heated seat, and then the little button on the left hand pannier on the top is for the pillion. That's got 5 levels as well. I'd say that 5 is pretty damn warm on these grips. After about half an hour, when it's sort of 5 degrees like this, I'd almost say it's uncomfortably warm. So I normally stick it on 5 if it's a cold morning, but by the end of my commute I knock it down to 2 or 3. The heated seat, I pretty much go everywhere at the moment with it on 5. I don't know if you just don't feel it the same as the grips when you sat on it, you know, through the jeans. But it's very nice and warm and cozy. It's a big old seat. So winter commuting on it is an absolute dream. I don't really know how you could be any warmer than this, to be honest. Besides heated clothing, of course, but as much as the bike can do, it does. And speaking of the seat, let's talk about the comfort on this bike. The bars are super wide, as you can see. The seat is also super wide, as I've mentioned. It's got a nice round shape to the back and a little lip there just to hold you in place. And then it's got that mid foot peg position. Now, whether that's consciously a decision by Honda to put them there from an ergonomic perspective, or whether they're somewhat limited by the flat 6, those cylinder heads sticking right out there where your feet would be, I'm not sure. But personally, you know, when you're in stop-start traffic like this, I find mid-position foot pegs quite a bit easier to, you know, waddle around with and get your feet up and down from the pegs quickly. And with all those things combined, yeah, it's a very comfortable bike. I've done one kind of big-ish ride on it, like 4 or 5 hours round trip on the weekend. And yeah, I could have been on this bike all day. It just cruises so easily on the motorway. The seat is perhaps a little bit higher than I was expecting, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing. It means that it's not cramped, but I can still easily flat-foot it. I'm about 5'9", and I'd say genetically I'm biased towards the torso and a little bit short in the legs. But yeah, I can get both feet down. I'm not quite sure I can flat-foot both sides, but at least the balls of my feet, I can get both balls down easily. I said I'm short in the leg, but not that short. The ride's quite cushy as well. You can see the forks. They're not traditional forks. It's a monoshock in there with a similar design to a BMW's. But yeah, it's quite smooth at the front. Some people say that it bottoms out easily, and I have noticed that a bit actually. When you hit a pothole, you do get a bit of a bump, and apparently the solution is to use the electronically adjustable, I can't show you now, the electronically adjustable preload. There are settings for just the rider and pillion, and then rider with luggage and rider and pillion with luggage. What is with all the ambulances today? This is like the 3rd or 4th ambulance I've seen with the blues on. Oh, come on, mate. But yeah, it seems a little bit daft to me to jack it up and affect the ride height just for the sake of the front not occasionally giving a bit of a thud. I mean, obviously the best thing to do is just avoid the potholes. Can't always be the case, but yeah, something I've noticed. The ride is good, but I have noticed that. I did my reading beforehand and saw it mentioned, and it has turned out to be true. The 4th thing that I've actually found pretty useful on this bike is the infotainment system, because you've got a full-on map, as you can see, and it actually works really well. I'm normally a little bit skeptical about the built-in navigation and infotainment systems in cars and bikes. The usability is generally not that great, especially when we're all used to using our phones where they've spent, you know, thousands if not millions of hours developing those interfaces and refining them. Sometimes these can be a bit clunky, but this is actually not too bad, especially once you get to grips with it. And I've found a few times, you know, where I've had to get somewhere quickly and not wanted to look up directions, that the navigation stuff has bailed me out. Prime example, actually, the battery went in the key fob. It's a bit unfortunate, I suppose, but this bike has done 10,000 miles. So yeah, just a couple of days after Honda dropped it off with me, the battery went whilst I was riding to work. Now, if the engine's running, it'll keep running. So obviously I just thought, keep it going and get to the nearest Honda dealership, and hopefully they'll replace it for me. I mean, I know now that it's just I think it's a C2032 battery, so I could have probably got one from a corner shop or something and replaced it myself, but I just didn't know. And also, you don't really want to leave your Goldwing outside with the engine running whilst you're messing around in a corner shop trying to find the right battery size. So yeah, I just put Chiswick Honda in and it took me straight there, and then they swapped the battery in a matter of minutes and we were back on the road. But occasionally it has bailed me out like that. Oh gosh, this weather. I suppose this is a fine demonstration of the cover the screen gives you, but I'm not quite going fast enough to get the rain off me. I'm getting a bit of a soaking now. Oh gosh. Yeah, the thing that normally sucks for bikers about sat-nav is the ETA, because motorcycles are far quicker in London getting anywhere than cars, and quite often, you know, something like Google Maps, it uses the data from other Google Maps users, mainly cars, and gives you an ETA that's based on loads of people stuck in traffic whilst you're filtering through. Sometimes it can be like half the time on a bike, so you don't really know how long you need to leave to get to places sometimes based on Google Maps. And I'd say that's still true of the navigation, the Honda navigation on this. It probably overestimates how long it's going to take you to get somewhere. Fortunately, this bike has Apple CarPlay, as does the new Africa Twin. I think some Harleys have it as well, but it's quite rare on bikes, certainly for now. And the great thing about CarPlay, if you've not used it before, I mean, I use it all the time because we don't own a car, so we hire a lot. So it's really easy to be able to plug your phone into modern cars and just get the same sat-nav layout you're used to. But yeah, if you've not seen it, it's basically like the iPhone interface, but with bigger icons, and it only supports apps that have integrated with CarPlay. So things like Spotify work for music, and WhatsApp for messages, podcasts, and of course navigation apps. But stuff like photography apps or whatever, you know, those kinds of things, they're not going to work. Or games. So I normally use Waze because it has a motorcycle mode, so your ETAs are based on only other motorcyclists or people who have it set to motorcycle mode. So it gives you really accurate ETAs, like down to a couple of minutes. I've found in London, Waze is accurate. I think some countries where motorcycles are the preferred mode of transport, out in Asia and the like, Google Maps has the same, but currently they don't have it in the UK. It doesn't have Android Auto, nor does the Africa Twin, and I'm not sure what's with that. I don't know if it's because they haven't managed to reach an agreement with Google on that, and I've seen some frustrated Android users commenting on my videos about the Africa Twin. Maybe they'll release that in a software update later. But yeah, having CarPlay is brilliant. The only big downside for me is that for some reason it'll only work if you've got a Bluetooth headset connected to the bike. So I have like a little Senna, I think, SMH5 on one of my other helmets, but I quite like to mix it up with the lids. I've got quite a few, and depends on the weather, and if it's bright I'll often wear this one because of the mirrored visor. If it's cold, I sometimes wear my motocross style retro Nex helmet because I can wear goggles with it and it doesn't mist up as much at the lights with your breathing. So it's a bit frustrating, to be honest. I'd like to be able to use it without a headset. Might bring this screen down a bit. Is it going to hit my GoPro? There we go. So yeah, that's when, you know, if I don't have a helmet with a headset on, I have to fall back on the navigation. But as I say, it's pleasantly surprised me. Is this a K1600 coming? The arch nemesis of the Goldwing, in the same colour as mine as well. Mine. I wish it was mine. In the same colour as the one that I am currently riding. Should have gone up there. If I put it in reverse and then in walking mode forward, look at that. Neutral, drive. Now the next couple of things that I like about this bike are altogether more mechanical. The first thing being the flat 6 engine. This is the first time I've experienced a 6-cylinder bike, and I have to say it is extremely smooth. Again, in my research before getting the bike, I read a few blog posts and forum posts that suggested that it wasn't quite as smooth as the previous generation Goldwing. But honestly, if like me you're used to riding a twin or something like that, this just feels like pure butter. The only thing that could be any smoother than this is like an electric bike or something like that, a Zero. Maybe some of you are unfamiliar with this engine, but it's like a Boxer twin BMW, but with 6 cylinders, 1.8 litres. The Goldwing started with a flat 4, I believe, so 2 cylinders each side, but I think it's around the 90s. I might be wrong about that, but they moved over to the flat 6. I mean, the only other vehicle that you can get with a flat 6 is a Porsche. But it's perfectly balanced. That's the thing about it. Because of the timing of the cylinders moving in opposite directions, it's a balanced motor. I believe the K1600 uses a straight 6, which is also perfectly balanced. But It's just very, very, very smooth, and it makes for a really easy ride. Both, you know, this pootling around town type riding, where it just purrs along so nicely, as well as on the motorway, where it's so happy at like 70, 80 plus. Not that I've ridden it that fast, but I can just tell, okay? Go on, mate. It has plenty of pep as well, this motor. It's built for torque, but yeah, when you give it some throttle, it does pick up quite nicely. And despite the fact that this bike is 380 kilograms, it still shifts. I won't be giving it full throttle just now, but I was surprised by how it goes. Last big positive on this bike for me, for a daily commuter, is the DCT. DCT stands for dual clutch transmission, for anybody that's not familiar, and it basically means it's an automatic gearbox. It uses 2 sets of gears, so 1, 3, 5 and 7. The odd gears are on one set, and then 2, 4, 6 on this bike are on another set, and then 2 clutches switch between those sets of gears, and you get this seamless acceleration. I think I'll do an in-depth video on what it's like to ride the DCT, but for the sake of this one, let me just say it's great. I mean, you're on the brakes there, and then it just idles at a standstill. No need to hold the clutch or find neutral, and then as you gently twist the throttle, it moves off. And then it's just, honestly, as I say, the acceleration, even at low speed like that, it just feels so smooth. It is a little bit snatchy on the throttle sometimes, and occasionally it bangs down a gear when you're not expecting it. Like, you might twist the throttle when you're cruising along, and then it realizes it needs a few more revs, and then it just shifts down a gear and gets going. So you've got to watch out for that. But you know, if you're not enjoying the choppiness of the throttle, you can always put it into rain mode or eco mode, and that takes the edge off a little bit. Oh, there's one bonus thing that I like about this bike actually, and I'm reluctant to demonstrate it because I don't want to upset the cars around me, but it's the horn. It's like a car horn and it's like two-tone, and it's so flipping loud. Woo! I mean, as if people didn't see you coming with those huge headlights and indicators. You know, they'll definitely hear you if you give it a toot. Now for the stuff I don't like. The price. It's 30 grand, this bike. I'm terrified of like scratching it, filtering, because you've got so much plastic on this bike. The panniers, the fairing, these wing mirrors. I'm sure it's going to be an expensive repair if you do damage it. And it's not just when you're riding as well. When you leave it in a parking bay, there's a good chance that someone's going to climb off their bikes and scrape their boots down the side of it or something like that. So yeah, that's a good reason not to ride one every day. It depends what your parking situation is like. You know, if you've got off-street parking at work and off-street parking at home, then that's great. But in the city where you might be needing to go to meetings at other people's offices and stuff, look at that, meetings at other people's offices and stuff like that, and you don't know where you're going to be able to park, occasionally you end up with like a tight parking bay, and you just have to squeeze in sometimes and hope for the best. And I haven't been doing that with this bike, partly because it's not mine, but if I did own it, I'd be wanting to keep it pristine. And you could argue the same for riding it in weather like this as well. I think there's been a little bit of salt on the roads while I was away on the Tiger launch. It's a bit warmer now, so no salt, but it's still wet, and eventually that's going to take its toll on the bike. It does age a bike quickly, as I found out even with like my street twin. You know, a winter or two of commuting on it, and it's not looking its best. The second thing is the cost of fuel as well. So a 1.8 litre motor and a 380 kilo bike. Every time you accelerate off the line to get that mass moving, and my mass as well, which is not insignificant, you know, it's digging deep into the gas, isn't it? I mean, I had an electric scooter from new, the NGT or Nugget. That was about 10p a day to charge or something. So I really enjoyed that. My street twin, I spend about 15 quid a week on petrol, but I think I'm spending more like 25 on this. Obviously, it's not the most efficient vehicle for getting around London, and I'm sure it gets way better fuel economy when it's at speed, just purring along, you know, on the motorway or something like that, where it's designed to be. this is a silly test anyway. No one's going to buy a Goldwing for commuting around London. It's just a bit of fun. Number 3 thing I don't like about commuting on it is the choppiness of the DCT that I've mentioned. Sometimes you just want a little bit of clutch, especially when you're between, you know, a couple of vehicles. If you're filtering and you're trying to make your way through, it does have that walking mode if you so wish, but you've got to put it into neutral, then into walking mode, and then press the walk forward or backward button. And there are times when you just want to be riding really slowly like that, and it's a little bit tricky on this transmission. It is possible to just crack the throttle like 0.5 millimeter and it will edge forward, but just occasionally, and I'm sure this comes with time and getting used to riding it, just occasionally I've given it a little bit too much and it's sort of jolted forward. And that brings me on to the last thing, which is kind of obvious. It's bloody massive, isn't it? It's a huge bike, 380 kilograms. I don't know the dimensions, but it's long and wide, and so it makes it a little bit slow for getting between the traffic. I mean, you can still have a bit of fun on it, filtering down the outside, you know, down the right hand side of the traffic. As long as it's clear, you're getting around as quick as you would on a smaller bike, but it's just on roads like this. When it gets to a standstill, if it's really busy, and yeah, you can't quite find those gaps. Now the weight is all super low down because of that flat 6 engine. Everything's right down the bottom there. So I was surprised when I got on it just how well it carries itself. I said this about the Rocket 3 as well. That's nowhere near as heavy as this, but still a heavy bike. But in many ways I prefer big heavy bikes like the Rocket and this than I do to an adventure bike where it's a lot more top heavy. Especially at low speed around the traffic, I just find this reasonably easy to maneuver, but it's still much heavier to daily than any other bike that I've ridden for 3 weeks through London. I'd love to spend 6 months on it and get really good at maneuvering it. I've seen there's a riding instructor on YouTube, I'll link to it in the description. I can't quite remember his name, but he teaches motorcycle policemen in the US to handle the big Harleys, and seeing him do U-turns and stuff like that on it, it's like watching a ballet dancer. He's effortless, swooping around, and I think it would be possible to become at one with this motorcycle and be that nimble on it, but I'm just not there yet, and therefore it takes me a bit longer to get everywhere. Physically it just won't fit as well sometimes. There are little gaps that guys on the scooters like them, or if I was on my street twin, you would be able to squeeze through, and when the traffic gets super thick like that, that's where you save a lot of time, is when it's at a standstill and you're able to pick your way through. That's the whole point of owning a motorbike in London, is it's the quickest way to get anywhere. But yeah, this bike just physically won't fit. It's got these mirrors which make it very wide at the front. They're slightly wider than the bars to give you that protection on your hands from the wind, I guess. They do fold in really easily. Look, you can just reach out, fold it in, fold the other one in, and then they push back out with barely any effort at all and click into place. But quite often, because I am paranoid of giving this bike back to Honda with scrapes all down the panniers because I've been cutting through the traffic and dragged them across someone's front bumper, I leave these out. They're like little antenna or a little gauge on the front, just to let me know when I'm reaching the limit of what's possible with this bike. The limit of squeezing anyway. It's not a dreadful bike to ride in town at these low speeds. I wish I'd got an extra GoPro pointing at my feet just to show you how little you actually have to put your feet down. You can ride at low speed like this and you're not really having to waddle it along. But yeah, at the same time, someone on a little dirt bike like that is always going to do you. And here, I could probably get between these two cars, but then the next two cars you probably won't get between, so you may as well just sit tight, enjoy the comfort and warmth of this big old beast. Yeah, just enjoy the luxury. So that's it. Can you daily the Goldwing? You certainly can, and it'll keep you warm and cozy, and you'll know where you're going with the built-in nav, and you'll enjoy the smoothness and serenity that it offers, but you just have to take your time with it. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. I'd love to hear from some Goldwing owners, whether they kind of ride them in this sort of traffic and whether it gets easier with time handling a big bike like this. Normally you get a few owners of a bike watching the videos when you review it. So yeah, let me know what you think. To the non-Goldwing owners, which probably accounts for like 99% of the people watching this video, I want to know what the biggest bike you've ridden is and what you thought of it. Do you think you could handle 380 kilos every day? I think I mentioned, but as well as the forward walking mode, you've got the reverse gear, which is absolutely necessary for getting it in the garage sometimes. The pavement has a steep angle to it up to our garage, so if I want to get it in backwards, I don't think I could push it up there, or I wouldn't fancy pushing it for fear of losing my balance. But yeah, what's the biggest bike you've ridden and how did you rate it? Previous to this, it was the Fat Bob for me, I think, or the Rocket. This is a whole new level of big bike. Let me know if you got any questions as well in the comments below. And as always, if you're new here and you want to see more videos like this, hit subscribe, and I'll see you next time.